Now I'm recording.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the board meeting. I'd like to call it to order, and in pursuant to Governor Cuomo's executive order 2021, there will be no in-person attendance at any regular or special meeting of Rush-Henrietta board until further notice. I'd just like to say that before we start, this will all be streamed on Zoom, and I'd like everyone to stand who's willing and able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this is totally new to us. I'd like to welcome everybody. We'll skip introductions because I'm not sure how that will be. So everyone is here. And I'd just like to start off the meeting by thanking Bo and our fabulous superintendent and the cabinet and his communications team for doing a wonderful job in this unprecedented situation handling the COVID-19 virus. And I thank him for all the leadership, and I thank his cabinet member for all the hours they've put in above and beyond. So thank you all.
I appreciate that. The team deserves the credit, truly. They've been magnificent. Everybody has stepped up and, done the right thing in support of our kids and our community during a really difficult times, but thank you.
Thank you. So let's move into our first item. Our first item is public forum. There will be no public forums. If you do have any questions during this time of the public forum or anything on the agenda, please submit your questions to Karen Flanagan, and her email is kflanagan@rhnet.org. If you have any questions, you can submit them to Karen. First on our agenda tonight is a public hearing on the budget. And again, in pursuant to Governor Cuomo's executive order, there will be no in-person attendance at any regular meeting or special meeting for the District of Rush-Henrietta until further notice. If you have any questions regarding the proposed budget for 2020 and 2020 to 21, please submit any questions to Andy Whitmore, and his email is awhitmore@rhnet.org. And following our agenda, we're looking at consent items. I'm going to go through each of, that's for personnel, consent items. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve consent items A and B. Moved by Diane, seconded by Anne Marie. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? The consent agenda items are passed. Karen, am I going too fast for you?
That's so good. Thank you.
Okay, if I'm going too fast, please make sure you slow me down.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is our personnel actions. Items, these will be taken, each action will be taken and voted on separately. So the first item up for action is item 9. It's a personnel action containing to personnel actions, and that is looking for a motion for these routine items. Moved by May, seconded by James. All in favor of personnel action say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? Personnel actions are carried. Next is personnel action item B, and this is pertaining to the approval of payment for Cub Care staff, food service and management in response to the COVID-19 crisis. I'm looking for a motion to accept personnel. Moved by Anne Marie, seconded by May. All in favor say aye.
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 That is carried. Next is personnel action, item C. This is the approval of $2 per hour for the additional pay for the food staff service. I'm looking for an item I'm looking for a motion to accept these. Moved by Doug, seconded by Diane. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is carried. Next is item D. That is the action pertaining to the authorization of the superintendent. I'm looking for a motion to approve the authorization of the superintendent. Moved by Doug, seconded by Diane. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Finally, item E. This is the action pertaining to the empowerment of the superintendent for the benefit of the Rush-Henrietta School District during this crisis of COVID-19. I need a motion to approve the item. Moved by Nikki, seconded by James. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. That is carried. That should bring us to our workshop. Item 10.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to Andy, just to walk you through some of the specifics. But you know, our situation has changed a bit over the course of the last couple weeks. I think, you know, as we've moved through the budget process, we've been in fairly good shape this year. But I think Rush-Henrietta, along with other districts around the state, we're gonna find ourselves in a difficult scenario, just as other districts are with this most recent crisis. And so as we have this conversation, you know, some of the decisions that we made early on in the process, we may need to rethink as a result of the situation that we find ourselves in now.
Thank you, Bo. As you stated, we are, as a nation, in an unprecedented situation. We've never seen such a stark decline in our economy as we've seen. And same thing is happening at the state level. Sales tax, which is a big driver for counties in the state, is down significantly. And certainly Wall Street, which is supplies about typically 20% of the tax revenue, is falling precipitously with the decline in the stock market. However, nobody really knows what level and how quickly things will return to normal. So our suggestion tonight is to continue with the budget that we've been building. This process started last December. We think it'd be prudent to continue with the budget as proposed. So the numbers that we talked about remain the same as last time. However, knowing the board may have to take mid-year corrections as events unfold and we get a better understanding of potential state aid reductions or other impacts. So the budget, as the final budget as proposed by the superintendent, is a $4.8 million increase, 3.64% increase. However, it does stay under the tax cap. So we are trying to be cognizant of our taxpayers. We're staying under the tax cap. And the big reason is a lot of the new growth in the town of Henrietta, there's new property being brought onto the tax roll. So it's a much larger base for spreading our taxes on. So the levy is up 3.78%, but the majority of that is driven by new properties on the tax roll. So our tax does remain under the 2% tax cap. But given that the state, there is some discussion about postponing this year's state aid payments and potentially cuts next year, the board will need to be prepared to act, and we'll recommend actions as the budget as the knowledge unfolds. But I think at this point, it's prudent to go forward with the budget as it's been outlined, because nobody knows how the timing or the severity of what the cuts may be. So since we're under the tax cap, the recommendation is to move forward, knowing that we'll continually have to make adjustments as the year unfolds. So any questions regarding the budget?
Anyone have any questions?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, one of the things, so the revenue and the expenditure budgets will remain as discussed. The next thing we will need guidance on are the propositions. We have our normal budget proposition, so we'll move forward with that. We have our normal school bus purchase proposition, which will not affect the tax rate, so I would propose moving forward with that. And then we have two other propositions. One is for the capital expenditures, $9 million for work at the high school athletic fields and the Good Shepherd site. A lot of things that the community has expressed interest in. We need to determine whether we want to move forward with that or potentially look at pausing. And the last item is the capital reserve, establishing a new capital reserve so future state aid could be put into it. This does not cause any expenditure of funds or encumber any funds currently. It just gives the board in future years flexibility to be able to contribute to reserve if they desire. So my recommendation would be to move forward with the propositions 1, 2, and 4, and then discuss proposition 3.
Okay. Do we have any discussions on proposition 3?
It would be hard to go out and spend that money and then try to explain to taxpayers, mid-year cuts or whatever would be coming down the road. It just wouldn't be right.
I agree with you, Diane.
Yeah, well, and, nobody knows what the future holds right now, but, some of the things I think we're hearing from, various outlets and sources and government is that things could get really, really bad in terms of the state budget. So yeah, I mean, everybody knows where I came down on the field this year, but we're dealing with a whole different world now and a whole different, the ground shifting under our feet in ways that I don't think any of us could conceive of 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I mean, I know we're talking mostly about Proposition 3 right now, but I've got to ask, what about Proposition 2 and the buses? I mean, is that money? I understand that the buses are on a regular rotation and schedule of maintenance and just becoming obsolete. I just got to ask, what about, that $2.4 million figure in Proposition 2?
That's definitely a fair question. We've already started the discussions with the head mechanic at the bus department to start identifying our buses that normally we would trade in that we could hold longer. My thought is similar to the first proposition. Put it forward knowing we may not fully execute it. We'll probably have to purchase some new buses just because of the condition of some of the older buses, but you're absolutely right. We may be able to not execute that full proposition. We only would do it partial. But at this point, we don't have a good number on what's absolutely needed versus what is typically prudent but could be delayed.
Understood.
Better to have that permission to spend the money, if but knowing we can pull back.
The other thing you have to weigh with bus purchases is oftentimes what it costs you to maintain buses, which are aging, versus the cost after the fact to buy new, especially when you factor in aid, which for transportation aid is
Right.
usually significant.
Right.
And to go back to the point you made about the field, James, that this is something that we've supported because we feel like it's a good thing for kids. But as you said, you know, our world has changed dramatically over the course of the past 2 weeks. And I do think that, you know, it's not a matter of if we're going to be in a difficult situation as the budget season progresses. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that the board seriously needs to consider in terms of taking that proposition out of the mix, unfortunately.
And we do get a little bit of dollars in trade-in, if you will, for the buses. So there's a little, if you say you're gonna, you know, you got the 2.4 million, well, we don't spend 1.4 million of it. At least, you know, we've replaced the buses that we need to replace.
Right.
A little money.
That's right. And as Bo said, because we do get state aid, when we purchase new, we get extended warranty. So there really is minimal upkeep the first 5 years. However, our thinking might change if they change the state aid rules. And that's when we would pull
Very
back
true.
on what we purchase. So if they decide not to aid the buses as typical, we would certainly reconsider that scenario. But the superintendent was correct, is typically that the offset with the state aid, it's just as cost effective to keep replacing and not have the high maintenance cost at the tail end of the life. But that may all change. At this point, you know, it's just nobody can determine what, but we'll certainly react as information unfolds.
Andy, can you talk a little bit about, you know, the advantage of holding back on the capital expenditure? I mean, I know probably the first question a lot of people would have is, aren't capital expenditures only supposed to be for capital projects?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Capital reserves can only be used for capital projects. However, if we go into a budget crisis and state aid is withheld or deferred, the district could quickly run into a cash deficit. And what we could do if the money has not been expended, and we have not borrowed for bonds, which we would not do for this project, it's locally funded, that money could be borrowed by the general fund rather than going to outside markets and having to borrow to keep our payroll intact, basically, and our other committed expenditures. We could borrow from the capital project and use it for short-term financing. So it would give us more buffer if things get very severe.
But that sounds like a true break glass in case of emergency kind of a situation.
Exactly. That would certainly be our last resort, but it might buy us some time. If things get very severe for long enough, we'll have to make significant cuts. And as you know, they always take time. They're painful. They take time. So we may need cash flow assistance at some point.
All with the knowledge we have to pay it back to the capital reserve fund.
Exactly. It could only be borrowed. It could not be taken from.
And to be clear, it's essentially borrowing from our own funds. It's not putting it up as collateral or anything like that.
That's correct. Right. So there's no cost. It's just changing the use of it, but knowing it has to go back at some point, but no external cost.
Thank you.
George, do we need a motion to take this off of the proposition, the election?
Well, you're about to make a motion to put what the propositions are going to be. So the motion would be to put forth propositions 1, 2, and 4.
Correct.
1, 2, and 4, and exclude the proposed proposition 3.
And proposition 4, at least, if things don't go as badly as they could, it still sets us up for building back up those capital reserves for future projects.
But I think there's a qualitative difference between the things you do in the ordinary course of events, like buying your buses and using your reserve funds and looking ahead and with the possibility of establishing a capital reserve fund. But to put a proposition out there, even if you're intending to keep the flexibility in case you choose to do it, it will look like you're planning to spend the $9 million, even if your plan is to see what develops. I just think it's qualitatively different because it's not in the ordinary course of what you would do, and I think it doesn't, it wouldn't fly well on the budget, on the proposition page this year.
Yeah.
Do we still have a place to put reserve money of current building reserve money?
No,
No.
we're just about at the max, and so that's what Proposition 4 allows us to do. It does not commit us to any level of funding, but at some point in the future, when we get some normalcy back, it allows us to direct building aid back into our reserves.
And it could be really important depending on the timing of cash flow next year with reimbursements from the state aid, which would normally flow back into the reserve fund. You don't have a place to put it, you could end up with cash that would cause you a problem budget-wise going into the next year.
I just wanted that out there.
Okay.
So I would make a motion that we,
Do we accept propositions 1, 2, and 4?
Someone should make that motion.
I said I make that motion.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Second.
Oh, sorry, I'll get closer to the mic.
Motion by Diane, seconded by Anne Marie. Are you out there?
Yes, sorry.
Seconded by Anne Marie. All in favor of adopting the election proposals 1, 2, and 4, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Motion was passed. Right. Next on our agenda, we are looking at a tax rate impact. Andy?
If the budget goes through, this is probably the tax rate impact is typically our worst case scenario. As you know, we never know the final tax rate until the assessed values are determined by the town assessor in May. But if the assessed values rise at a lower rate than they have the last few years, these are some of the tax impacts that we would have. So $40 for a $100,000 house. So the tax rate is under 2%, 1.99%, but there is a very good chance it could be lower. If you look at what happened last year, we were projecting a 1.9% tax rate, and it actually went down 1.3% because the assessed values, the growth in the town was much stronger than we thought. So the growth had continued to be on track to be very significant this year. Clearly with the economy now, that'll probably slow down, but for at least the first 9 months of the year, the assessor had said growth was very strong. So there's still a good possibility we could come in lower than the 1.99% tax. And the other thing we like to do, because so many of our voters are senior citizens who support our schools, we always compare to the Social Security COLA. And you can see we are a little bit over it this year, which is not our preference, but there's a good chance that it'll end up being under the COLA. And if you looked at our history the last 10 years, our tax rate increases have been less than half of what the Social Security COLA is. Because we always like to be cognizant of our taxpayers, especially our senior citizens who tend to be very supportive of the schools, but also are on fixed budgets. Any questions on the tax rates?
No.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you. And that brings us to item 11, the seeker approval for Good Shepherd. Do we, I want to take a look at the seeker. Can I have a motion to accept the seeker schedule, the seeker
So moved.
approval?
This is actually a declaration of a negative impact, finding that the project, if you were to go forward with it at some point in the future, will not have a negative environmental impact sufficient to require further study or further developments with regard to how the project is played out.
George, is that good forevermore, or is there a statute of limitations on it, or?
I'm not aware of a specific statute of limitations. It would probably be good for as long as the conditions which underlie the report remain pretty much the same.
So this is at least one step for someday in the future were we to go ahead with the project.
Right, and
this would be out of the way already.
Right, and it represents work primarily which is like 98% done, and you're just really finishing going forward and putting the final pieces on it, including the adoption of the declaration, then sending out the notice to the other interested agencies, and then you can put it in the drawer for a while.
Yeah, so even though we pulled Proposition 3 for next year, because so much of the investment, the cost has already been done to do this, as George said, we're hopeful that once the economy returns to normal, we could move forward with this project, and we've already incurred the expense, so we may as well finalize the analysis.
Okay, so can I have a motion pertaining to the approval of the seeker declaration for the Good Shepherd project? Moved by Nikki, seconded by
So, Diane.
Diane. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Jennifer,
Yes,
just a question. I thought Diane had already made the first motion. Am I correct or incorrect?
I did, but there was a whole bunch of conversation.
Okay, so it's Nikki and then Diane. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, next up is our superintendent report.
Okay, there were 3 items that were submitted as written documents for your review and consideration. They are the Special Education Services Plan, the Winter Sports Report, and the NISCUS Winter Institute Report. Are there any comments or questions related to those documents that were submitted in writing?
No?
No.
Okay. My oral report is really centered around everything that's transpired in the last couple of weeks related to the COVID-19 crisis. You know, our team really deserves the credit in the way that this situation was handled. The situation that we find ourselves in is really unprecedented, and there's no playbook for any of this. Like I said, this has truly been a team effort. People have really pulled together from March 5th, when we really had our first scare, till present day. You know, people don't realize we work round the clock. We're having, whether we're in the office, whether it's weekends, whether it's early morning, late at night, you know, everybody's been outstanding in terms of maintaining internal communication, really making a concerted effort to try to coordinate external communication with families and community members. You know, the situation changes daily. It's fluids, which makes it challenging at times, because a decision that you make today may change tomorrow based on the most recent guidance and what's happening, whether it be through the Department of Health, the Center for Disease Control, or guidance that comes directly from the governor's office. We've tried to take a safety first approach and put that at the forefront in terms of protecting everyone's health and well-being, and to focus on those basic needs that kids and families might have. And that's something that I said from the beginning. Certainly, you know, we're an educational institution, and home learning is important, but first and foremost, we wanted to make sure that no one was put in harm's way. and that during any sort of closure, whether it be short-term or long-term, that families are going to be supported with basic needs. To have referrals and partnerships with community-based organizations that can support childcare and mental health services. And you know, I think one of the most important things we're doing right now in terms of feeding families who may be in need during this crisis. So again, I can't say enough about the team, how quickly they mobilized to get these plans in place and communicate them. You know, we started out from day one, we were feeding about, you know, putting out between breakfast and lunch about 500 meals, and we're up now above 1,000 a day across 5 sites. So I'm really, I feel, you know, that our team is really fortunate to be in a position to be able to support families in that way. You know, we know now that this looks like this crisis is going to last a bit longer than initially anticipated, and we're probably going to be in a situation where we're going to have to keep schools closed indefinitely. And I know that uncertainty weighs heavy on all of us, especially our kids and their families, which is why we made the decision to deploy Chromebooks at the primary level. Because we anticipate, you know, our initial home learning plan was set up for about a 2-week window. And again, it looks like we're going to be closed for a lot longer than that. So I want to give credit to Dina, and I also want to give a whole lot of credit to Brad Malone and his team, because over the course of the next couple of days, we're going to deploy more than 600 Chromebooks. And you reminded me at the start of the meeting, I think it's 651 to be exact. And that's a whole lot of Chromebooks. And it's not just a matter of handing them out. There's a whole lot of preparation that goes into assigning those Chromebooks and doing it in a way that's orderly, but also in this situation, making sure that it's done in a way that is going to keep everyone safe. So a big shout out to Dina, but a big shout out to Brad and his team too, because they've helped us to operationalize this. And that's going to be the cornerstone for what we do as far as home learning in the long term, which we'll talk more about in a minute. This is also an opportunity over the course of the next couple of days to give families and teachers one last opportunity to get into, well, not really anymore. That was our initial plan, was to allow people to come into buildings to get essential items, you know, sometimes things like medication, instruments, other technological devices. But the guidance changed pretty quickly on that. It actually changed over the weekend, and we had to pivot. And so that's why you saw that guidance go out initially to principals and then to everyone, letting them know that we would have to distribute those items curbside. They had to be what we deemed essential items. Otherwise, there was really no way for principals to manage that in a way that wouldn't have been chaotic. And ultimately, principals and their teams had to have access to those items if we were going to keep people out of buildings and do it in a way that was safe and orderly. So that's why we had to shift course so quickly. But like I said, people have been very understanding in most cases, and the principals and their teams have been very flexible and been very diligent in terms of trying to get people what they need out of buildings so that we can move forward. As I said before, you know, our home learning plan was centered around initially providing home learning resources, and that's what we were directed to do for a variety of reasons, most of which centered around equity issues. And so we know now that it looks like we're going to be out a bit longer than anticipated. And again, I want to commend Dina and her work with the principals to move quickly to develop a long-range learning plan to provide more direct support in a virtual space, to provide more robust learning opportunities for kids. So we're in a position where we're going to be rolling that out. I know that parents are anxious and teachers are anxious to get at it. And she's done a lot of great work with teams to be in a position where we can roll that out and make some different learning opportunities available to our kids as soon as the start of next week. And again, you know, I can't say enough about the people who are working behind the scenes, whether it be on communication or operational pieces, disinfecting classrooms, our cleaners, people that are providing meals. It really is an incredible honor to be a part of this team and to be in a position where, you know, there's so much uncertainty going on around us, to be in a position where we can make some decisions which positively impact the community. And everybody's been willing to do that. There have been a whole lot of teacher volunteers who have come in, whether it be to help distribute Chromebooks and essential items, or in some cases, they volunteered to work with Geraldo during this crisis to drive meals to families who didn't have transportation but were in need. So I know that we haven't gotten every single decision right, but like I said, there's no playbook for this stuff. And generally speaking, I'm just really proud of you know, the effort that people have made to try to do the right thing. So you know, our plan is to, over the course of the next couple of days, give people an opportunity to collect their belongings. We'll finish sanitizing buildings, and then we'll go on sort of a staff drawdown, which is why we had you approve those items earlier in the agenda, because you know, the executive order that came from the governor to draw down work staff and to get people to work remotely out of an abundance of caution. And we expect over the course of this next week that we'll have a skeleton crew on site with most of our folks working from home, and that's where we sit now. So at this point, I'll open it up to any comments or questions that you might have at this point.
I must commend the teachers who reached out to their kids. I know I've seen different teachers reaching out to kids, and I think it's great. It helps ease their minds at this time when they've never, this is one giant snow day. I mean, it helps to ease their minds, and it's very much appreciated.
Yeah, just kudos to the whole team. I mean, you know, I was over at Leary picking up a Chromebook for my kindergartner a couple hours ago, and you know, there was Karen Wolgass, there was Jen Tommelty, smiles as wide as all outside, and just they're making it happen. And there was no line, and just, you know, from the logistical, you know, details like that to the overall, you know, getting food in as many tummies as possible, because, you know, nothing. Crises like these, you know, nothing highlights inequity more. And so doing what we can to keep our kids, you know, those, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like you touched on, Bo, you know, doing what we can to provide those basics, you know, it's commendable. And so kudos to you, the whole team, the whole staff, the whole district.
So that's really all I have for the superintendent's report. Again, and I truly appreciate the support from the board. That means so much more than you know, especially in this type of a situation where there's so many moving parts and there's so much uncertainty. We, you know, on behalf of our entire team, we truly appreciate it. So that concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay, thanks. Karen, all set to move on to board reports?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, first up is Youth Development Advisory Committee. May, is it you or me?
Yes. The last couple of meetings we discussed the plans for, they were scheduled to have the Hall of Fame event on the 29th, and the open mic night, April 8th. Of course, those two, they're not happening right now. But we talked about the group of kids that were nominated, and we picked 26 kids. Very impressive group of students. We're looking forward to the event to celebrate them and showcase their what they bring to not only their district, their schools, the whole community. Anita is trying to find out another way we can still celebrate them, but that was about it.
Okay, great. And informational exchange meeting on March 11th.
All right, it seemed like eons ago, so I didn't really remember too much, but it was not implicit bias. It wasn't information that was much different than Dr. Archie presented. We actually did the same activity, but I thought it was good. It was just presented in a different way. But I don't have too much unless you do, Nikki.
No, it was a great speaker though. She was really, I was really hoping to see that video. I watched it after the fact that what was it called again? It was, Nerlon, do you remember what it was? You've shown it before. Oh, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
Sure. The danger of a single story.
Yes, that's what it was. It was fantastic. So if you have a chance, I'd recommend that. Other than that, it was similar to Dr. Archie's.
Okay, great, thank you. And the next meetings we're not able to meet due to the COVID-19. That's the youth assessment, the DPAC, and the budget advisory. We just wanted to keep them on the schedule to make aware that they were to be held, but they weren't because of the COVID-19. That brings us to board recap. May?
You're muted,
You're
May.
muted.
You guys provided the technology for kids and taught them, but you didn't include the parents. So
That's right.
that should be the next step.
I did the same thing in a meeting earlier today. So
Yes. Great meeting. Thank you. Yeah, I got nothing.
Okay, our next meeting will be April 14th. So I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
You think we can get Andy to yodel at all from his background there?
Just wait until next meeting, see where I go.
$2 for you.
See what kind of background you can come up with.
Where in the world is Andy Whitmore?
Yeah.
Before we adjourn, I just want to.
Diane?
At the next meeting.
I'm sorry, could you repeat
Could you
that?
repeat that? You cut out.
So I'm just confirming that we're going to finish the scholarship at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we'll do it at the executive session.
Next time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Doug, seconded by James. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for zooming in.
Great job, everyone.
All right, thank you.
all right, be safe, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.